We are so happy for everybody to join us here at today's Brown Bag Lunch to start kind of the fall. I know it's early, but start the fall semester of rare book dealing. So today's Brown Bag Lunch will be exploring the vital role of collegial interaction between rare book dealers and scholarly conferences with a focus on RBMS community. Our panelists will share insights on how dealers can partner with libraries to curate and acquire more diverse materials. Discussion topics will include strategies for building inclusive collections, fostering productive collaborations between the trade and institutions, and examining the broader role of booksellers in advancing equity within special collections. So first off, thanks for coming. This is sponsored by the ABAA and the Gender Equity Initiative. So I appreciate everybody coming on this Tuesday and spending an hour with us. We would love everybody's input. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then Julie is going to explain exactly what RBMS is. So take it away. Why don't you start, Rebecca, and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Rebecca Bauman. I am the head of curatorial services and curator of modern books at the Lilly Library, which is the rare book and manuscript library at Indiana University.
Nora?
Hi, all. I'm Nora Gaber. I currently work for Bruce McKittrick at Bruce McKittrick Rare Books. And prior to that, I was a librarian, a rare books librarian at DePaul University.
Thanks. Kendall?
There's my mute button. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Kendall Spencer. I am an apprentice at DeWolf and Wood. And when I'm not involving myself in rare books, I'm a lawyer.
And Kim?
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Schwank and I work with Lux Mentis Booksellers. Previous to that, I've been a rare book librarian and archivist for the past about now 20 going on 25 years.
Thanks, Kim. And Julie, take it away.
Hi, I'm Julie McClune, and I'm a curator at the University of Michigan Library Special Collections Research Center, where I'm kind of a jack of all trades curator. So I work with our materials after 1700 that don't fall into somebody else's. It's a curatorial bucket. It's a very, very messy way of describing it. But another way to say is I focus on books mostly from the 18th to the 20th century, but also archival collections in theater and literary archives, and especially the Janus Bluestein Langoni Culinary Archives. So work with lots of different kinds of collections. And shall I go right into talking about RBMS?
Yes, please.
All right, so RBMS is the Rare Books and Manuscripts section of the Association of College and Research Libraries of the American Library Association, or RBMS of ACRL of ALA, suggesting that librarians may love acronyms even more than we love books. But the really important thing to know about us is the Rare Books and Manuscripts section, which is founded back in the 1950s and has held a pre-conference or conference every year since 1961, has this gathering each summer in June of librarians from across the country, in some cases even beyond the United States. And a treasured part of this for many years has been the Booksellers Showcase that usually happens on Tuesday, the first night of the conference. And it's a really wonderful opportunity for librarians and booksellers to get together and to gather over books. We'll leave it there for the moment.
Okay, well, thank you. So does anybody have anything that they particularly want to talk about, or would you like me to just ask questions first?
I'll jump in with one more thing,
Okay, great.
which is just to say that our next conference is going to be in 2026 in Milwaukee. And that is going to have a theme of advocacy. It's being chaired by Colleen Tyson and Margaret Gamm. And they two things from them. One, in addition to the bookseller showcase that has happened for many years, the last few years, there's also been a virtual bookseller showcase. And Colleen and Margaret especially wanted me to mention that that's been really popular. And in fact, it's come up over and over in conference surveys after the fact that people really, really value that. So we hope that that's something that can continue to happen. And also that we very much welcome proposals for papers or panels from booksellers. So you're very much invited to come join the conference as a participant as well and be part of those conversations.
Yeah, it sold out so quickly this last year that I didn't get a chance. I was at the RBMS, but I did not get to go to any of the talks because they were really popular. So when you see it come up, and if you're interested, you really need to jump on that. Absolutely. I'm going to start off with talking about RBMS and like what is the importance for each one of you to in attending RBMS? Anybody?
I can start.
Thank you.
I think the importance of attending RBMS is to really make those face-to-face connections with um, others in our community and other librarians and booksellers. It's really helpful to take things off the screen, no longer in emails, where we can actually talk. And I feel like some of my friendships have grown just over looking at books together, whether or not it's another bookseller or librarian. So I think making those connections and actually being in person and able to do that when we can is really valuable.
Yeah.
And the past 2 years, I've co-led the RBMS Bookseller Showcase Tour, which I also think has been um, it's been really rewarding to do because I remember my first RBMS, I felt very nervous when I was a new curator, hadn't and new to my role, and it was being able to like meet others was a really nice way to get introduced to the conference.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Nora. I one of the things that I especially enjoyed about it this year was just it, it felt like there wasn't as much pressure, right? As a dealer, when you're doing these massive shows, you're at your booth for most of the time. RBMS is nice because you're engaging with the academic community without the pressure of, needing to satisfy your, booth budget, basically. And so I think, for me, I think it's great because it opens up, it really kind of clears those lines of communication. And kind of, I know we're going to get to this later, Lizzie, but also, allows us the opportunity to ask questions that we might not get to ask at shows. And I think that's pretty important for the trade and just for the community at large.
Thank you. So what do you feel the importance of attending RBMS? Like, how can like first time attendees tap into the experience of booksellers during the conference? Like, with your first time or maybe even the second or third time going, what is the most important way to get talking to librarians?
Well, from experience, I started I think my first one was 2004. So I was a paraprofessional back then in the library, and I applied for a scholarship because otherwise, a lot of us paraprofessionals at the time did not have a budget for pro dev, basically. So that is an excellent way because then you get invited to a breakfast, and then sort of you get that name recognition there. But also you can attend. So if you don't have the budget, but one of the things for me was beyond just the professional development to put on my resume was the fact that even now is there is a validity that librarians see with the book trade. So basically, us showing up, regardless if you're showing or not, it shows the academic community that you really support um, the policies and procedures or the initiatives that libraries are taking, especially currently. And so there's a little bit of validity there for librarians, I think, to say, oh, okay, the book trade really values what is coming out of this collegialness here. And so for me, that showing up it's basically what I'm saying, is really important. So for us now, a lot of times we don't show, but we attend. And there's a myriad of reasons why I've done that personally and professionally. It's continued those relationships I had when I was working in the library. But then also, I mean, I picked up, we can talk about this later, I picked up a lot of valuable insight into what is going on currently in the library world, the field.
Kim, I think that's a really important thing. I think a lot of booksellers don't realize that if you don't get, because there's a lottery system, because it's a small amount of booksellers that end up, because it's usually not a big
Lottery.
venue,
Mhm.
that you can actually apply to go, so that's a really important thing for other book dealers to know, that there's a different way of looking at it if you don't get picked in the lottery.
Right. Right, absolutely. And you can also sponsor as well. But you can also, and I know going back several years, Julie and I were on a committee for the scholarships and maybe even the diversity committee a long time ago. And that was another way to get involved is you can be on a committee. And so you get to see what's kind of going on in development, I guess, and how things are evolving in rare books and manuscripts as well. And just, meet other colleagues there too. But
What are the different committees?
oh gosh, Julie, there's so many. You
There
have to
are
go on
many committees.
rbms.info. That you can
Yes.
make them there.
RBMS.info will give you all of them, but diversity committees are very active that Kim mentioned. Also conference program planning committees each year. But also I want to draw attention to the discussion groups, because there's a discussion group for collection development and this discussion group for curators and conservators. And occasionally they also have discussion group meetings at the conferences. So the curators and conservators one this year at Yale. And so if you're able to attend those sessions, again, that's a great way to get a feeling for what is happening in libraries and universities right now.
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm learning some of this information firsthand, because this is, Lizzie, this kind of goes back to your earlier question of, why is it important to go, right? I mean, some of this information you can't get over email, or you wouldn't just stumble across it. It takes a physical interaction with individuals in the room. And I think to just what Julie was saying, you sit down with people, you get a chance to have a conversation, and you learn about the different ways you can engage with this community. And I actually think I'm gonna follow up with you later, Julie, on the discussion point, because I think that's a great way to address, honestly, some of the topics that I know our community is looking to address, but as well as this panel as a whole. And so I think it's a great idea. I can't say enough good things, honestly.
So I'm gonna just put you on the spot there, Kendall. Like, what are some of those discussions that we tend to talk about in the books from the bookseller's point of view?
Well, I mean, so the list goes on and on, right? I mean, but everything from how trends across collections are changing. The big one for me lately has been, how do you want to discuss a collection, right? How do you talk about the material that you're dealing with? And it's both a one of the more difficult areas to really dive into, but also for someone like myself, it's incredibly stimulating. Noticing that, you have, let's just say, you have the book as an object, as a subject matter, but also knowing that there's different ways to tell, or to describe the story that it tells. And I think having those types of discussions, you might find that one person describes the same book you have in, from one point of view, and you might have another person who has the exact same book, same edition, everything, and their description is from an entirely different perspective. And I think that those are some of the discussions that I've found most stimulating, especially when dealing with racial, or other potentially sensitive material that is somewhat dependent on who your audience is, and getting into, like, what is the purpose for having a certain collection? What's the end goal? If there is one, who's your audience? I've found those to be pretty key discussions. And then, without going too far into it yet, also trying to discuss, really, where is our place in society? What is our role? Meaning, what role do booksellers and/or librarians have in addressing social issues? How do we within the trade address some of the problems that we see in society, and what's our role within that larger picture? Just to name a few.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah.
Well, this is, oh, sorry.
I was actually going to mention your name, Rebecca. Just really quickly. I think that a lot of times for me, it is helpful to actually learn the collections at that institution or organization. And Rebecca and I have had many discussions about, what actually is being used in curriculum, and that's really important. What are the teaching materials? And so, getting on that level, a lot of times it is. As a librarian who's done instruction before, it is very time consuming to do classes. And if you're, stacked with 10 or more teaching sessions, like you really need to have your head wrapped around those collections. So if we can help sort of bridge that in any way, that's super helpful for the librarians as well. And so Rebecca, you might have some thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point I wanted to make, was that the RBMS showcase is really one of the only places where booksellers can meet and talk to young librarians and librarians who don't have purchasing power, right? And may never have purchasing power, but those librarians have tons of interesting things to say that will help you get a better sense of where the institution is in terms of what they're collecting, what lights their fire, what their students want, what their faculty wants. And they may also, I just know when I first went to like the bookseller showcase, which was what I was most excited about when I was like baby librarian going to RBMS, was like, because there's no way I'm going to ever go to a fair, right? I didn't think at the time anybody would ever send me to like the Antiquarian book fair. I knew they existed, but I didn't think I'd get to go. And most librarians will never get to go to an Antiquarian book fair ever. Which is a shame because they learned so much from that. But also I think booksellers learned from us. So like when I started, going to RBMS, I was a teaching librarian. So yeah, I was talking to people like Kim about like, here's what oh, I have something similar to that and I use it in class every week. Here's why I use it in class every week. And so that might kind of be one of those ways that Kendall was talking about, reframing or thinking about an item in a different context. It isn't because a lot of times booksellers are so focused on, and not you all, because you all are, all amazing, but like very established, like they're very focused on just like, this is the first edition or whatever. But when somebody turns around and they're like, hey, I can sell this to Rebecca because this book has a cross-dressing character in it. Suddenly, that book goes from a $300 book to a $1,200 book because they know that I'm looking for that kind of material, that I will buy it. And what was just seemed like a super boring 19th century novel because somebody bothered to read it and it had this one character doing something interesting that we're talking about a lot right now, it suddenly becomes a more special and interesting and desirable book for a librarian.
My question is like, how Kim and Brooke, how did that conversation start? You're saying like was there first a phone conversation? Did you reach out before you got there, or was it all like on site?
When I first went to the showcase, I definitely was like, I remember the first year that I went to RBMS, I went to the showcase and didn't talk to anyone because everybody seemed very unapproachable. And I was really sad about it. And I went back and emailed my director, who's been in the field forever. And he gave me a list of names who are like, these are people who are nice and who we buy from. So I went and sought those people out. And once I sort of said, I'm from this institution, we buy from you, my boss, it was like, it totally opened up. And that, I think you should not need that key, right? Like, and I definitely have seen a lot of improvement, but sometimes like now I find myself in the role of taking a younger librarian and being like, no, go talk to them. Like, it's not scary, I promise. Like, look at that person with the purple hair. They're really cool. Like, go talk to them. So yeah, sometimes it takes like an introduction, and that's something I think as a community we can all do, and why RBMS is a really good space to do that, because you have people in those mentor roles who are going to like take people to booths and make introductions and get over some of that fear. I think there's so many neurodivergent people in our field, myself included, that we're kind of a hot mess when it comes to conferences. And they can seem really scary, but for anyone who's like has that anxiety, just know that there are many of us in the library field, and it's a very like safe and welcoming space, I think.
Right. I think in all similarly in the rare book world, I mean, there's, we have similar, crossovers there. And I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room in terms of booksellers. And so this is our business. We're trying to make money. We have to sell books to be able to pay our mortgage, our rent, our, health insurance, whatever it is. So there is kind of a weird thing happening, especially at RBMS, because we do want to sell something. But I have gone to many, sometimes just as a helper to somebody else. I have done it myself, but knowing that maybe I'm not going to sell anything, I'm just going to make a connection. And I think that is an interesting, we have a couple of people, obviously, on this panel who have been on both sides, Nora and Kim. And so it's an interesting place. And I think it's important to talk about it from obviously the business side because it's a business. We are trying to make a living, but we are also doing something that I personally think is important. So do either one of you want to talk about the difference between, knowing that you have to sell a book, but also the most important part of making that connection?
I think for me it's pretty straightforward and easy because I've been as a librarian and as a rare book cataloger. So I think the bib standard descriptive part of it is super helpful. Um, at the same time, then as thinking about it in terms of commerce, like there is a lot of respect, I think, that librarians give the book trade for book scholarship. And so for me, it's really important to um, define myself as a bookseller, but also as a scholar. So being participating either, I mean, I've given talks before at RBMS and I've done, like I said, committees, but then participate. So actually go to panels, take notes, ask questions, because then you kind of have to do that little dance between being someone who's there from a retail or from a commerce side of you, but also you get just another level of like, I don't want to say respect because it's kind of cheesy, but it's true. Like you're seen in a different light than just sort of sending out catalogs and whatnot. You're actually engaged, that you appear to be involved in the development of humanities, the development of technologies that happen to go, and everything else that's, and understanding too that resources right now are under threat for libraries and institutional funding. And so being there is like really important, just to sort of hold the moment for academia and for knowledge anyways. I mean, I felt this last year. I felt like supporting librarians who are going through a really rough time, a lot of folks with funding and just like policy and procedures being kind of calmed down. And so just being there to support layoffs and things like that this year was very helpful to basically be in solidarity um, with that for sure. Nora, if you have anything else to add.
I think you captured it really well. I think showing up and being an active part of the community, as a colleague and as a partner, I think that's a really great way. I think you captured it well.
Okay, I'm going to just, so Dan Friedis has in the chat, as this discussion turns to questions of sales versus building relationships between dealers and dealers, I'm curious, dealers, I'm sorry, dealers and librarians and dealers, I'm curious where librarians stand on sharing their collection development priorities, especially when an area is new for the library. My sense is there's a tension between wanting dealers to know versus thinking that stating something is a priority might raise prices. Personally, I just want to know what people are looking for. So I certainly wouldn't be raising my prices because of that. I'd be just excited to try to find those things. Um, Anybody else have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to talk about the collection development because again, thinking about this, and thank you, Liz, for thinking about for bringing up the fact that it's, you all do have to make a living, and we all actually also have to make a living at our jobs, and collection development is one part of my job, right? And so when the fall semester gets going in a couple of weeks and 80% of my job is teaching, that means I barely have time to scan through a catalog. So if a dealer knows that I am looking for particular things and once every 6 months or so, they come across 3 things that they think might be really great fits, they send that to me and I can look at that in less than an hour between my class and my reading room shift. And because they've tailored the description to, oh, this has advice to a daughter from a mother embedded in a 19th century novel, and it's talking about changing religions, right? And maybe they know, and I made that up hypothetically, by the way, but so if they know that that's sort of what I'm looking for, then it saves them time and it saves me time, and it helps both of us to make a living and also improve cultural heritage preservation. So it's really all synergistic, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
oh,
no, no, go
sorry.
on, go on, go on, go on.
Every librarian is 17 jobs in a trench coat. Seriously, we don't have time.
Rebecca,
Like,
I just want to
I
say,
wish.
Rebecca, I just want to say, I don't think a lot of, and I think we should talk about this because I don't think a lot of book dealers, I mean, I think a lot of them know that, but I think some of them don't actually realize that. I know from past history, my father's a book dealer, and his, he used to go visit people, and their only job was to buy books. And that is obviously not the case anymore, and it's changed dramatically. And so I don't think that book dealers generally are thinking about that. I mean, we wear a lot of hats too because we are running a business, but you guys are like, again, I like the trench coat thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are still some like old school curators that's their only job, but that's so rare. Jobs are getting combined, right? Because lines get cut, budgets get cut. You don't want to cut salaries. So what do? Well, this person was doing something on an interim capacity and they're just going to make it full time. And now you've got 2 titles. Maybe you have 3 titles next year. So we just keep getting more and more and more on our plates. And as much as like, I would so happily spend all day, every day reading bookseller catalogs. There's nothing I'd rather do. I am to the point, and I mean, I seriously, I love doing it, but I'm to the point where a targeted offer is almost all I have the capacity to deal with because I'm doing so many other things. So having those booksellers that are my trusted partners who get us as an institution and are making those really honed in pitches that are easy for me to say yes to, and they're not bombarding me with 12 offers per week that I have to say no to. That is where I think booksellers can be really, really successful, and help on both of our ends with our busy workloads is like really targeted pitches. But yeah, I don't see anyone to address Dan's question. I doubt there's anybody out there who's worrying about like raising prices. And I definitely do think librarians need to continue to do more to educate our colleagues about what booksellers do and how like higher prices aren't bad for us. I mean, like, yes, it means we can buy fewer books with our budget, but it's helping you all to continue do what you're doing. It's part of a larger ecosystem. So like I sometimes see that a book has been marked way up from when it, because I see so many catalogs and I'm like, oh, they bought that one I saw last month and they marked it up. I'm happy to pay the higher price if it's something that we really want or need. So yeah, I would not make that a concern.
Or maybe if that bookseller has kind of taken a second look and realized, there's something else here. But I think I'd like to circle around to what you were saying, Rebecca, about, how much can you look at? you know, people are putting out these catalogs, you know, which we have to. I mean, this is what we do, you know, with 20, 30, 40 things in. And so you're saying that the best way is to be very targeted, to understand your audience, which I think
Yeah,
is
I
really
mean, unfortunately, yes. And I do think, as I said, we need to work more on our side to get people to read catalogs. I am also like a big advocate of ex libris, like keep doing the catalogs because people are like, we need to shut this shit down. Like I do
Huh.
still read them when I can. When I'm training new curators, part of my training of new curators is like, you will read every ex libris catalog on Tuesdays because that's how they learn. That's how my students learn. Um, but as far as buying, yeah, I think we are moving towards just everyone is so busy that it's not never a bad idea to draw someone's attention to something you think they'll like. It's never a bad idea. The worst they can say is no or ignore you because they've got 12,000 emails, but you know.
right. The worst thing is no. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the sort of trade secret, you know, thinking about sort of whispering behind, I think that's an antiquated view of the book trade. I also think that if you are not looking at the local the ILS, the online catalogs, you're lazy. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel about it. If you need to look at, and sometimes stuff is a catalog, so it's not the access isn't there. But that is to answer Leslie Arthur's question. Like, you know, I spend a lot of time looking through local catalogs, but I can read them because I was a cataloger. So, but you know, take some time just to spend looking through the digital collections on the library site. You know what their exhibits are, because that's probably going to be what classes are being taught at the universities, because that's really, you know, where you're going to see possibly what materials are going to be being used, whether it's for actual curriculum or it's for an exhibit and things like that. It's hard to do a cold call, you know, sometimes, as we call, you know, to reach out, but you know, send something in the mail, you know, send a postcard. It's another option. But I'd say really honing in, especially, is super important to what places already what they have and what they don't have, because they're not going to look, you know, they're like going through a few catalogs and go, we already have this stuff, and they may, you know, librarians may stop at that point, you know, if
Right.
it's a repetitive thing that they're like, yeah, you know, because things change. Even sometimes what the development statement is on the website may not be the areas that they're actually buying in at
Right.
that.
I'm just going to say what Leslie Arthur asked was, how can a dealer reasonably discover what librarians are looking for and what is preferred approach to a librarian? And I think, yeah, also you just you can't be shy. You really have to just put yourself out there. Um, Kylie Piner asked, I think it's worthwhile to point out that most booksellers have terrible websites. We know
I
it.
was
We don't
laughing at that
really
too.
care. I don't think I have a terrible website. We don't really care. I care. We live in analog. Thus, the best way to see our inventory and new arrivals is usually to read the Ex Libris catalog postings. I would agree and disagree because I do like my website. Anybody
Well,
else
some
want to?
people work very hard on the website. I think all of that is fair. You know, this entire segment of our discussion there's kind of two words that keep coming to mind, and it all comes down to creating value. How do you create value? Now, what I'm hearing from, you know, Rebecca and Kim is, for librarians, you know, because, you know, it's 17 jobs in a trench coat, you know, creating value is really understanding what they're collecting, understanding what they're teaching, and making it as simple as possible and time efficient. And you know, what I'll say to that is, I think that makes a great deal of sense. What I'll also say is, on the book selling piece, I think, you know, we need to do a better job of understanding there are various ways to create value, right? So, you know, there might be some people that, you know, will say no to going to RBMS or similar shows because, oh, well, I can't see myself, you know, selling a lot of material. Maybe not, but that's not necessarily the only or best way to create value for the trade and for yourself. Something that Kim was saying earlier, I think a big part of it is having those conversations and understanding why something is being collected. For me, I've gotten a lot out of just understanding why a certain course is being taught, why someone got into the trade in the first place. Because, when we talk about even, I'm a lawyer, so the dots are always floating all over the place. I'm always trying to find a way to make the dots connect. So part of that for me is learning how to fill in those blanks. And if I have an understanding of, hey, this new course popped up on campus, this is why. Part of the fun and the stimulation for me comes in me going in our back room and figuring out, okay, what do I or how might I approach a unique way of filling in the blank here? Maybe I can have, a similar story, but from a publisher, for example, who's from a background that tells a story that adds value to that. So I think while it's not always time efficient, I think the value add down the line is often dismissed, unfortunately.
Right. I mean, before I get to this next question from Kate, I think I was just talking to a colleague yesterday, and they were talking about the fact that we were all kind of a little bit under siege, and I think I can say that um, and that it's really important for all of us to make a collective like effort to work together in the book selling. And I especially, we were talking about the booksellers, because we all are trying to do the same thing, and we are single entities, but we are under this under the ABAA. But it is certainly important for us at this point to work together. So I would completely agree with Kendall. So I think Kate has a really good point here. Given that libraries and their budgets are under threat in the current political environment, how might that change collection practices? As a dealer who specializes in social history and material by and for people of diverse backgrounds, I do worry that the move toward greater diversity in collections will shrink as budgets shrink.
Mm.
So, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that's not a danger. What I will say is that sometimes institutional inertia and the fact that academia is like herding cats could work in our favor, and that we can't get all the cats going the same direction when we're trying to go in a particular direction. That also means you can't really get all the cats to turn around. So I guess that's what I would say. Can't say budgets won't shrink, and I can't say that there won't be limitations placed on things, but also in some ways, and maybe this isn't always true anymore, but in a lot of ways, nobody is watching too closely what I am buying on the 6th floor of the Hatcher Library.
Yeah, I think we're very much in a place right now where, yeah, nobody's doing line by line what we buy, but we are all very terrified that that will come. So yeah, I think I can't really say anything other than it is something to worry about. I'm very worried about it. Probably being of the people here, maybe in the most red state, I'm not sure. So as I said in the chat, we've been forbidden from using the words diversity, equity, and inclusion in any written materials, which is obviously, that was all of our written materials. So we are not changing the work that we do. However, we are not changing our commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion. We just can't put it on our website right now. But yeah, it doesn't change the work. It doesn't change our collection priorities. But we do live in fear of someone I'm even sitting here, I'm like, should I be talking about this on this webinar right now? Because our whole philosophy is basically just don't be noticed right now, just keep it under the radar. So I think this is very much a concern.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out, because as book dealers, we have a professional code of ethics, but we don't have necessarily university codes of ethics, which is very different in some ways. We have a lot of freedom and liberties to not be neutral. We don't have to, come at this as a stance of like, well, I'm just going to go in the middle of this. It's like, no, I'm not going to. but that's me, so I'm going to try my best to continue to work with librarians that have diversity statements and things like that full force. I'm speaking biasly from my background and everything, but at the same time, there's a lot to be said about still continuing to support curriculums when language and things like that are shutting down, and academic freedoms and academic liberties. So it's like, for me, it's like my whole point is like, we can't be neutral as booksellers anymore
And
on that stance.
responding or jumping off of what Kim and Rebecca said, and also kind of responding to a question someone asked over in the chat, and it was like, how do you find out what librarians want to buy? And when the collection statements aren't online, or it's a very brief statement and maybe it's hard to tell. I don't want to promise this is true of everyone, but I am personally quite happy to have like short Zoom conversations. I think this is one thing that the pandemic gave us, is that we're all fairly comfortable with video calls these days. And in some ways, a 20-minute Zoom call is easier than responding to in a detailed email message. And so I'm happy. I actually met with a new book dealer 6 months ago, maybe, where he was just starting out and just wanted to talk in general about how book dealers can work with librarians. And since then, he's quoted me a couple things, and a couple of them I bought. So I'm happy to even, I might say, okay, I'm in the middle of crazy instruction time. I'll talk to you in December. How about we pencil in December 6th? So it might not be right away, but I think many librarians are quite happy to have conversations about what we're trying to collect. And that's, a little bit more private than what's online. I think that can help with ways we can still talk about collecting diverse collections. And it's hard to do that publicly.
Wow. Okay, Julie. Yeah, actually, that's interesting. I think it's not the book dealer from the 1960s who drives across the country and visits all of the special collections, which is from what I understand, used to go on. And we don't really have to do that anymore. So that is actually
I wish I
one.
could do that.
Me too.
Gas is expensive. Okay.
Wait,
Gas
Joe
is
Gay
crazy,
says he still does that. Yay, Joe.
Yeah.
I just wanted Luis Hendrickson said a dealer whose website allows me to be notified of new arrivals in the following categories. By this means, check these categories. Oh, that's interesting. So, I think what she's saying is that if you are a book dealer and you put out catalogs, have the ability for people to check off what they're interested in, because that obviously saves time.
Mhm.
Right. Let's see.
And that's
Oh,
that interface thing, with the
right.
websites and stuff. and if I don't have a huge tech background, but maybe this is the thing. Younger folks may have that ability. So, think about that in terms of social, social media and things like that too.
Although even just titling your catalog in a way that it's clear, like what subject matter it's focusing on, is really helpful, as opposed to like spring 2025. Like that doesn't
Or
tell
like,
me if I should
yeah,
read that or not. But
like just
Mhm.
manuscripts being more like, say, if you have manuscripts being like, okay, this is a manuscript about women's work, or like
right.
being more specific about what exactly you're putting in there. I'm just going to jump over to one of the questions that we had put ahead of time, because I think it's interesting. How do you see the rare book trade evolving in response to the conversations around equity and representation? Does anybody
Mm.
want to jump in on that?
I'll say, I could say a lot about it, but I think it's a question of, is the trade going to evolve, right? It is not a definite that the trade, I hope it's going to evolve. I am, I, along with a lot of colleagues here, even on this call, as active members of that community, want all of us to grow. But even as we've seen lately, there's no guarantee. We don't have pressure from universities and that type of thing. Like we're not dealing with similarly stringent pressures, and so it's still a question of if we are going to. As far as the how, let's assume we make an affirmative choice to say yes, we want to grow. I think people have to be willing to be uncomfortable and be willing to do the work that it requires. It's as simple as that. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a person of color, right? Like diversity can mean a multitude of things. whether it's thought back, like all of that. And so, I think I I enjoy being a part of organizations that, it's clear where they stand, and people stand up for whatever they believe in. I don't mind disagreeing with people. That's fine. I think people have that right. But I think the sort of middle ground answer to that, Lizzie, of how we can, evolve, is getting back to a place where we can have meaningful discussions and we're comfortable being in disagreement. Everyone's not going to agree on the same thing, but we should all be able to commit to a couple of things that all of us as members of the trade are willing to stand by and stand under. And I think that's a great place to start.
Anybody else on that one?
Well, a couple of things, I know we're running out of time, but one of the things that I learned this year from RBMS was something very practical. And that is in the collection, actually, when you're cataloging, there are a lot of things that you can put in there in terms of like either keywords to help the cataloging along, but also it's going to be useful to users later and to people looking for information. And that is basically looking at inclusive cataloging standards, because that is where a lot of libraries are going now. So sort of the language and the names and the people that you want to highlight in these collections. So do the work ahead of time. So if you have an author and it turns out they happen to be a colored person, then maybe you need to write and address that topic. Two, there was some things about writing the table of contents for certain things, and that is very useful. So there's a lot of, in short, there's a lot of work that you can do even in the catalogs with this metadata that actually needs to be rectified, because cataloging has had a slow molasses movement into sort of coming into inclusivity. And it's taken a long time for policy and procedure to happen at the top. And now we're seeing what's happening at the top, where you can't even use words like diversity. So can we do this work as booksellers, to help with some of that, and to support some of the work that, librarians may not be allowed to do. And so that's one thing, one takeaway, that one of my best takeaways that I had from this year's RBMS was that was very technical, but
Yeah.
extremely useful.
And
So
Kim, I think
talk about the whole metadata thing?
go on.
I'm just wondering because I mean this is actually something that I'm interested in and interested in seeing what Julie and Rebecca like. Is there any um is there any playbook on this, or is it just being made up as we go?
What I'm exactly
I'm just like the keywords, the metadata, like I'm feeling like a lot of that is subjective and it's
well,
hard to
yeah,
yeah.
cataloging is very subjective, but it at the same time, you have to sort of keep up with bibliographic standards of kind of what's going on in the field. If you look at our RBMS genre terms and things like that, so it gets a little like, metadata nerd level. At the same time, like, here's a great example. If you're putting Native American, for example, on sort of blanket statements on your materials, you need to look a little further and say, let's try to identify the sovereign nation, the actual band of folks, the language that is, whether it's indigenous language or, things like that. That's something that you can do. That's just one little snippet of things you can do.
Mhm.
Because now those name recognitions, those proper name recognitions are happening, in cataloging, to where the classifications are getting more specific instead of blanket statements about people, right? Communities.
Got it. Got it. That's yeah. I mean, Julie, anything you want to add to that in terms of
Yeah, so cataloging is actually one big thing I don't do. I bring collections in and then I teach and do outreach, but I actually don't do the description in the middle. But we do have a preparative description group of folks within cataloging and metadata that, I mean, for the most part, in general, we're still using Library of Congress subject terms, but we do also have some local subject terms that we use instead. But the other thing I would say is that even if you're not mapping directly to say what appears in the library catalog, I actually love it when book dealers include a printed version of their description for the item with the shipment, because then I keep that with the book and it gets right. And so then when someone pages it to the reading room, they see
I
that,
know everybody
it's
loves
not
that.
online.
This is all I ask of booksellers. Is put the description. It takes us longer than anything else we do in the acquisitions process and drives me personally insane because I'm the one who has to search my email. And then I go to your catalog and guess what? The link is dead, or I bought it.
Yeah.
So you took it off your website because of course you did. Why wouldn't you? But I don't have the description anymore and my catalogers need it.
Yes, you do such great work, and it's amazing
book.
work that's really useful, and we want to make sure people can continue to use it when it gets to the researchers.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, I mean, a lot of book dealers realize that. I think sometimes it's just a, you know, a mistake. But yes, we are all saying, okay, Rebecca, we will we will do that. Acid-free descriptions, please. Yes, I will. I don't know if I can always do that because of restraints, but I'm going to go into some of because we are running out of time. So, in everybody's view, what does a truly equitable special collections ecosystem look like in 10 to 20 years if we were all still here?
I'm going to be honest, I think our timeline's longer than that. I work at an institution that recently celebrated its bicentennial. So there's been collecting happening here for 200 years. And even if I work here for the next 10 or 20 years, I can't make this collection equitable in that amount of time. I can change shapes and I can change trajectories, and I want very much to do that work. But I also think it's important to recognize that you can't undo the past 200 years of history. I think that diversifying the profession for both book dealers and librarians is a really important component. That's something that RBMS has also had as a priority. And while that's something that's happening slowly, it is happening. And I think that's actually, honestly, is probably the most important thing to continue.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just, just really quickly. I don't, I agree with Julie's saying, I think our timeline's a little longer than that, but, and that's if we get there, right? I think as far as collections are concerned, university collections in particular, I think if there's a significant lack of equity on campus and in the classroom, the chances of your collections being equitable are probably slim, right? So I think a lot of, as a collector myself, it mirrors the lens through which your thinking is being, developed at the same time. And so I think we'll get there, or we'll get close to there, when people's thought processes are changing, and when the temperature on campus and what we're seeing just out in the ether shifts. I think that's when we'll start seeing that type of movement. But until then, I think we're still going to be fighting a good fight for quite a long time.
Right. I mean, it was changing. There was change going on.
Yeah.
It was really, it was really great to see. And I don't think that's going to go away
Right.
soon. Anybody else?
I want to respond to Peter because I think this is really important. Are the RBMS membership open and recommended? Absolutely. You can join. You don't have to be affiliated with an institution at all. You do need to go through this sort of hierarchy of AOA and then RBMS. But definitely, like it's not a only academic affiliated membership only. There's different tiers that you can choose for membership.
And I'll apologize in advance
Encouraged.
because you may find it frustrating to look at and realize you not only have to buy an ALA membership, you then have to pay the
Yes.
ACRL membership to get to RBMS, and
Right.
totally understand if it doesn't make sense or isn't feasible for you,
Right.
but take a look
But
at
it is
and decide.
doable. So folks, it's not closed doors to just, librarians, and for sure.
Actually, I did not know that, so that's really interesting. Anybody want to anything that we haven't talked about that anybody wants to, they feel the need to get out there, because we are heading down.
I just think
Yeah.
the more opportunities we have to engage with librarians, the better. Especially in situations that don't have a significant financial tie to them. I think it's great to hear about why people got into library arts and their cataloging and what made them develop the collection that they have. I enjoy those discussions, and I think as dealers, it gives us a snapshot of what the boots on the ground individuals are actually thinking and doing and what their students are looking for. And it's just fascinating conversations. People in this environment are incredibly interesting people, so the more the merrier.
Right. Also, I mean, what would you want to see changed for specifically for like anybody have any like for RBMS? Like, how would you want it? How would you want like a change?
I'll just throw out an
Well, I would.
idea.
Okay.
Oh, one of the things I just really quick, one of the things I noticed this year was a lot of the dealers said, well, a lot of the librarians are over here. And during like the beverage breaks, you also have to respect the fact that librarians are there to learn and network themselves. So, do that healthy balance between like you wanting to sell and then giving librarians a space to enjoy that professional development time because it's often not it's only the only time that folks can get away from their desk, maybe one conference they can go to a year, and they want to see people too, so respecting that space, but at the same time, maybe being creative about how you approach people during the RBMS time too.
Right.
And I'll just say during the Booksellers Showcase, be aware a lot of people who are coming in, this may be the only book fair they've been to, their first book fair.
Yeah.
Where there's a large proportion of us who are somewhat anxious introverts. Put on your pretending I'm an extrovert hat and definitely reach out. Don't assume somebody isn't talking to you because they don't want to. Maybe they actually would really appreciate a tour through your booth. So by all means, be extroverted and proactive or pretend you are.
Right. Yeah, I did notice that a lot of people are in groups and you don't want to disturb their conversation. But you do want them to, take a take a browse at what you have. So yeah, there is a definite balance there. That, and if anybody has any ideas, let us know because we're always looking for different ways.
I have a tidbit of information, and it's public knowledge. If you sponsor a session financially, then you get the attendee list. So you could make, send. I mean, I send out very pointed, like personal emails beforehand and say, "Hey, I'm looking forward to RBMS. We're going to see you there when our showing. Blah 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 blah." That's not a secret, right? So think about that. If you have the means to be able to do that, that's an awesome way to really see like who are your colleagues who may be coming, as well.
Right. Joe Fay says, for librarians, please encourage new librarians to talk to us too. We just like to talk about books and manuscripts and ephemera and photographs and but yes, we do. We love talking about the stuff we have. That's why we have it. That's why we've bought it because we want to. It's not always just it is about the numbers and it is about the dollar signs, but we generally people who are in the book selling business really love the things that they have and they do want to talk about them. I think that's it. We're at 3:02, so we that was really good. I wish we had more time. But we are going to be this goes to YouTube, the ABA YouTube channel, so it'll be live. I think in 1 to 2 days. So you can if you've only been able to catch a snippet of it, you can watch the whole thing there. And we really appreciate everybody coming out. We had a huge turnout. We're getting a lot of thank yous. Thank you everybody who was on the panel for coming. We really appreciate it and just trying to build a community here. We really appreciate it. So thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you next month in September.